called old. If it's good, if it's great, if it's a piece of art, it's timeless. And tell me what, I'm staying to watch again because I love this film.
Oh.
You tell me after you watch this, if it moves you, if it enlightens you, if it lifts your spirits, if it isn't aged, not really 90 years old. You'll be the judge. Randall, you have had to deal though with something that it does have fragility. Well, film has fragility too, of course, 35mm film. But costumes are fragile. Tell us a little about, because I'm going to ask Greg some specifics here, as I will for you. Tell us about saving and restoring costumes. What's involved?
Well, there's a lot of elements are involved with costume restoration. I will give a shout out to Betsy Potter, who isn't here today, but Betsy Potter does our restoration work on our collection. Just to give you a sense of what we have in the Paramount collection, there are 3,500 individual vintage pieces dating back to 1914.
Wow.
And then there's a big gap in our collection. That's a whole long story that we're not going to go into. But from 1987 to today, to 2019. But the vintage stuff, yes, was never really stored properly. It was part of our rental department, which is what I was running the rental floor, and I would discover these things, and frankly, I hid a lot of
And just to make that even clearer, when he says the rental department, it means that people who were doing new movies and new TV shows could come and rent a costume that might have been worn by Jeanette MacDonald.
Oh, yes.
Or Maurice Chevalier.
Wow.
Or Alan Ladd. Or Bing Crosby. Or Grace Kelly. Or any number of other stars. Just in the routine inventory, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So one of the tricks I did was when I would check in stuff, we had to do, we didn't have a barcode system, but we had to write everything up, and I would always know where to look in those garments for a name. And if there was a name, oh, we can't rent this costume. And then it would get kind of tucked away. And I did the same thing actually with the jewelry collection, which Jackie Rohr, who's sitting over here, oversees. Our jewelry collection. The same thing, I hid the jewelry. It was in a room that was sort of out of sight, out of mind, and when they dismantled the costume department, I said, oh, you're not going to get anything for that jewelry. It's just, wait, we'll find somebody, but it's not that. I knew what it was. It was the Ten Commandments. It was Samson and Delilah. It was the Crusades. I mean, it was a beautiful collection of vintage jewelry. Anyway, but as far as, unfortunately, when we did have the rental department, things weren't stored properly, so a lot of our 1920s costumes literally fell off the hangers. Anything that was beaded, anything that had any weight to it was never really stored because it was reused for other films. And that happened from the 1920s clear through the 1960s and 70s.
And fabric does deteriorate over time.
It does deteriorate, and so when Betsy takes on a project, she a lot of times has to rebuild the entire interior of the dress. So the dress is resting actually on another dress inside of it. And the fabric that she tends to use is China silk. And so she will create a new garment underneath, and that's what everything gets retacked back to. In the case of the train, which thank God Paramount owns this, that train has never been touched. It's never been restored. That is original from 1929. What you see is 1929 right in front of you. We were just discussing this at lunch. We don't think that the train was used for any other production. So we've never found it in any stills. We haven't seen it in any of our older films. So it's amazing that it has survived, and the fact that Greg has the dress and had it restored, lovingly restored. So maybe you could talk about some of the restoration process that happened on the dress.
I'd be delighted to. Well, about 5 years ago, I went to an auction. There are maybe once or twice a year they have auctions of movie costumes, and I saw this dress and fell in love with it, but it was in pretty wretched condition, actually. I suspect it had been hung on a hanger for many, many years, and the shoulders were totally gone. They were just hardly there anymore.
How much does it weigh? Do you know?
The dress?
Yeah.
Probably about 5 pounds, I'm guessing, because it's quite heavy with the beading and the pearls and everything. But I just loved the design of it, and I knew it was Travis Banton, and I love Travis Banton. So I said, I gotta have this dress, and luckily I was able to get it. And then luckily I came across a fellow by the name of Sean Lockridge, who was assistant to Rhett Turner, and he really understood what to do to bring it back to life, and it was a long process over many, many months and many, many dollars. A lot more than I paid for the dress, actually. But you know, when you love something, you don't care. You want it to come back to life again. And so I was thrilled to be able to bring it back, and we found pearls and rhinestones to match the ones on there, to replace the ones that had fallen off, because generally the threads go first for the beading, much before the fabric goes, that kind of threading goes. And then, on top of it all, I was online looking at an exhibit of Edith Head back east, and lo and behold, I wonder whose that was. It turns out that you indeed had, yes, his, had done an exhibit on Edith Head, and featuring, among other things, even though that was not Edith Head, this fabulous part of the dress that I had been missing all this time. So that's how we got in touch, and I said, Randall, I have half of what you need, and you have what I need. Of course, he refused to give the train to me, which I had hoped. Doesn't it seem right that I should own it? Thank you. But he didn't see it that way. No. So consequently, this is our marriage today for the first time in 90 years. The train and the dress are back together again. Isn't that exciting? And to top it all off, I noticed that one of the big elements about the dress was this fabulous headpiece, which we call kakachka. It's a Russian term for like a tiara. And that was missing. So I went to a jeweler here in Hollywood, and he recreated it for me at great cost. And then I discovered that Randall had that in his collection as well. So you see the original, which is actually quite fragile now, along with my recreation of it. So I guess when you're a crazy costume collector like I am, you just go out of your way to make sure you can do as much as you can to bring these costumes back to life again.
And it is something that you do very avidly. Tell us how many costumes you own.
I have about 500 now.
Wow.
It's become quite a passion for me, and almost I shouldn't say a disease, but an addiction.
Sure, I get it.
You get it. Okay. You can't. There's never too much of those, right? So I keep constantly buying more things, but I love them, and it's my way of sort of saving a bit of the golden age of Hollywood.
But you told me that this is your oldest piece.
It is 1929, as you know, for this, and rarely does anything survive before that, because we're talking, number one, silent era, and I don't know why, but I guess they just didn't take care of their costumes before in the silent era. I never see hardly anything ever surviving, and also the age issue too. And also I think a lot of the stuff was actually they just wore things that they owned. A lot of times the stars would just bring in their own wardrobe and wear that, rather than having costume designers do things except for period pictures.
Just to be clear, you are not independently wealthy.
No, this is my retirement you're looking at, right? No. It's funny. I was joking. I had the same car. I purchased it in 1973, and I just got rid of it. So I'm very frugal that way. Everything's funneled into my costume collection. Yes.
Randall, you not only do what you do, supervising, but you actually started the costume archive here at Paramount.
Yeah. I was working, it's a long story, but I had been working in the old costume department that we had here. And I was managing the rental floor at this point, and then they announced magnanimously, we're closing down this department, but they knew I'd been hiding things. My boss, Paul Birmingham, bless his heart. Paul Birmingham said, okay, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to the different studios and see how they archive their materials, because I think we should be starting an archive. So I did. I went to every one of them, and it was Leith Adams at Warner Brothers who took me sort of under his wing and sort of taught me the ropes of how to do it. So that's what established the costume archive. And really, I started with probably maybe 150 pieces, and now, again, over 29,000 individual pieces that are in the contemporary collection, and that vintage collection has 3,500 pieces. And then, Jackie, what we have, 12,500 pieces of jewelry? Yes,
12,500 pieces of jewelry.
Yes,
Wow.
and only about, how much, not even a quarter of it is identified.
I'm up to 8%.
8% is identified. Numbers, they keep lying. But yes, that's so, and we are the only studio with a jewelry archive, which we're very proud of. Because a lot of those pieces are from the DeMille films, so we have a nice representation of the Ten Commandments. Vincent Sampson and Delilah, The Crusades, those type of films. But yeah, this is what we do, and we are recognized worldwide now.
Well, as you should be, indeed. For so many years, for so many years, the studios neglected everything, including their films. And of course, we all know about the price we have paid for that as film buffs and aficionados and students, that so many films were allowed to decompose, especially from the silent era. The sound era is very much represented, but the silent era is not. Fortunately, studios caught on at a certain point, about, what do you say, about 30 years ago, 35 years ago, the tide turned. Everybody said, wait a minute, these are, first off, they're not only important historically, but they're assets.
Yes.
They're assets. I mean, these films still have life to them, and not to put it on a mundane basis, but they're assets that are worth money and can generate revenue. We put them out on DVD and Blu-ray. We can show them publicly, and which is why it's very nice of Paramount and Universal. Well, Universal now owns this film to allow us to show it here as a fundraiser today. It's a gracious gesture on their part, and they've given us what is called a DCP. We're not showing film today. We're showing a digital reproduction of an original 35 millimeter print, perhaps from the negative. I'm not sure, but it's wonderful that Hollywood has finally caught up with itself. We can't change the past, but we can know the present. There are people like you and archivists and collectors who are maintaining all of this, and that's so important. And the last person who's going to join us today is a living link, to film we're going to see, and a heritage that is almost indescribable, because Ernst Lubitsch is one of the giants, one of the titans of filmmaking, both in Europe and here in Hollywood. Please welcome his daughter, Nicola. We are so happy that you're here.
I'm happy to be here too. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you all for coming. It's wonderful.
Of course.
We just met over lunch also.
And we said everything we had to say.
We'll repeat it for the benefit of the crowd. But first, let's establish the fact that you only knew your father for a relatively short time.
The last time I saw my father, I was 8.
But 8 is old enough to have memories, and I'm sure you cherish those.
Yes. And I've learned more about him as I've gotten older. I think, sort of perversely, growing up, I decided not to read anything about him, not to ask anybody anything, partly because I was shy and I had very good manners and was brought up very strictly, like never talk unless somebody talks to you. And then because he was my father, and I wanted to keep that memory really kind of sacred for me. I didn't want to read about what people thought, why did he put his camera there, and what is the Lubitsch touch, and why did he do this? It was almost kind of, don't tell me that, I don't want to know. Don't tell me I know it better. But of course I really didn't. And so taking part in these festivals and meeting people like you has really been an enormous privilege and joy as I've gotten older and more mature, and I've learned a lot about my father, so this is another learning experience.
Wonderful. Wonderful to see it through your eyes that way. Is it fair to say that you were a Lubitsch fan?
It's fair to say.
I don't know anyone who isn't, quite honestly. His films are so joyful, joyous. It's a joyous experience to watch these films. Again, to repeat a story, when did you realize your father was a movie maker and that he was, regarded so highly?
I don't know that I ever really knew how, growing up, how highly regarded. I mean, he's your father. I suppose that the Queen of it, you know, in England, if your father is the king or the queen, you don't think about, gee, maybe it's different, but you just take that for granted. But the first movie that I saw of his was Heaven Can Wait, and he showed it for me at Fox, which is the only studio that I remember. And I don't know where he went. He just left me in the screening room with my note. And I don't know how many of you have seen it, but there's a scene, and it's about a man meeting the devil and recounting his life to see if he's going to heaven or to hell. And this woman with horrible legs comes before him, and the devil she's going on and on and on and on, and the devil takes one look at her legs and goes like that and opens the trap door, and down she goes.
My.
Fire comes up, and I was absolutely terrified. And I started screaming, and I ran out of the screening room into the studio. I never saw it again until I was in my 20s.
Wow.
So that was my first encounter.
When you did visit one of his sets,
I did. I visited, the only set that I visited was Clooney Brown. And it was starring Jennifer Jones and Charles Boyer, but Peter Lawford was in it as well, and I had the most incredible crush on him. So good-looking. And he had a crush, not on me. I mean, I was like 7 or something. He had a crush on Jennifer Jones. And I was telling you that in those days, the dressing rooms for everyone, the actors, directors, and so forth, were like a large Easter egg made of metal. And there were some steps going down. And Peter got on the steps backwards, and Jennifer was standing over there, and did this somersault flip backwards down the stairs to impress her. And I was just heartbroken it wasn't for me. So that's my other. But you know, going on the set when you're a kid is so boring. Oh my God, you have to stand there and just watch and the same thing, and
a lot of waiting around.
a lot of waiting around. But Daddy, I mean, I suppose I must have been more when I don't remember the specific movie, but on every set that Daddy was on, he had a piano because he loved music. And he was always playing the piano on the set, and at home too.
There are pictures of you, including one that somebody
Yes.
handed you today,
Somebody handed it.
of you with your father at the keyboard at home.
Well, he always used to, you know, he could not read music, but he loved music, and he played music, and if we had Horowitz or Rubinstein or Iturbi at our house, it was always Daddy playing the piano, which I guess should have been embarrassing. And it was all kind of coffee house music that you would hear in a European coffee house, wonderful kind of just lilting, dancing music. And when I was little, he would come back from the studio, he would sit at the piano, and I would sit next to him, and he would make up these wonderful stories, kind of from Lubitsch land, you know, tales of just princesses and wonderful people, I'm sure, in costumes and jewelry and all of that, and just make up the music. And it was just this incredible time of me and my father. And I suppose that's when I say I didn't want to read about him, but somebody else telling me, because that man and that person and that Daddy was mine, and those were my memories, and nobody else shared them. So that was very special.
I'm sure, how could they do? But you needn't, I'm sure you know by now, you needn't have feared reading what other people thought of him. I've never
You can
heard.
be so pompous sometimes, you know it. I'm sorry. But being a film historian or theorist or academic is really
I'm not talking
knowing
about people who actually knew him,
No.
who worked with him, uniformly loved him.
Yes, that's totally different. They did. Never raised his voice, never said a bad word. Seriously, I mean, it was amazing. was a man not of things, which the older I get and the more movies that I see, I think how interesting. He didn't care about his clothes. He didn't care about his car. When the car broke down, he just turned to his chauffeur and said, "Get another big black car." I mean, it didn't matter. He doesn't. If he had a collection of something in his office or in his studio, or the secretary went and bought it. I mean, it was just filling his space. He didn't read books. It's terrible, isn't it? He read the only thing anybody ever saw him read was Napoleon, because they thought there was some talk about perhaps him playing Napoleon.
Interesting.
But he just, he didn't have all those, we lived in a kind of Mexican house, a very simple, it was wonderful, but not full of satin and lace and all of that.
Not decorated like one of the
Not at
films.
all, not at all.
What part of town?
Bel Air, 268 Bel Air Road. Yeah, it's still there. Still there.
And you grew up with other children of movie people.
Well, I didn't live here. We moved away. My parents split up when I was 4, so I lived in New York half the year, and then I spent all my vacations with my father. And so my best friend, as I was telling you, was Mervyn LeRoy's daughter, Linda, who lived next door up the incinerator. And she is to this day still my friend. But on the whole, I didn't really belong to the Hollywood world because I didn't go to school or grow up here or whatever.
Have you had the experience over the years of meeting people who did work with your father?
At times, but I didn't, I met Billy Wilder, of course, and Samson Rafelson, whom I adored. That was a very emotional meeting because I met him later in life, and he was just wonderful, wonderful man. And David Niven, and of course Jeanette, but I didn't meet her later. I met her when I was little because she would come to our house a lot and sing. And Daddy would play the piano, and she would sing, and for a little girl, that high, screechy voice was very rude, I know, but I didn't appreciate her then. So, no, I haven't met that many people, unfortunately.
Well, we're going to get to spend time in the world that your father created. He really, today they call it world building. Production designers refer to world building. Is what they do. Well, that's what your father did. He created these fantasy kingdoms, these fantasy environments for his actors and for the characters that his writers dreamed up. And there's no better place to be. No place I'd rather live than in Lubitsch land. Truly. Yeah. And he did something that most actors, in other cases, disliked. He acted out scenes for them. And
No, I was just going to interject here. He was the head of Paramount, which was really interesting. The only director who was the head of the studio, and he drove everybody crazy because he was not suited to that role, and he was on everybody's set telling them how to direct. So that lasted a very brief.
in the mid-30s, right? Well, interestingly, the man who wrote or co-wrote all the songs you're going to hear, Victor Schertzinger, was also a movie director. He had parallel careers, separate careers, and he went on to direct Grace Moore and her musicals in the 30s. He directed the first 2 road movies with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby. Has a long, long resume, but he was also a songwriter, and you're going to hear his work right now. And you'll also see several personalities who are not as well remembered as Maurice Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald. You're going to see the great Lupino Lane, who was a wonderful British music hall star, stage star, and who came here to make silent film comedies, but was perfectly suited to sound, as you'll hear. And Lillian Roth, who was a dynamic personality in vaudeville and on Broadway, who also came here at the right time, the beginning of talkies, and later wrote a very sensational autobiography called I'll Cry Tomorrow, which was turned into a movie with Susan Hayward about her battle with alcoholism. And so it's a wonderful cast, and I think it's a marvel of a film because it was everybody's talkie debut. Jeanette MacDonald was their first movie altogether. Chevalier was brand new in this country. Try to remember that as you watch him. He'd never been in front of a movie camera before, but he owns it. And if you had seen him on stage, you would have seen him from a distance, like the middle of this auditorium, but now you could see him larger than life. And he is kind of larger than life in this film. And Lubitsch, Mr. Lubitsch, Herr Lubitsch, had never made a talking picture either. And this one was very successful. It was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. You can read more about it in your program book. Lots more to read in the program, including about Travis Banton and all the other principals here. So we're going to stop talking now and let the film speak for itself. Let's thank Nicola Lubitsch.